Elizabeth is the fourth child of 6 children. Her father is a lumber tycoon and her mother is a homemaker. She grew up in Toronto, Canada, and she's named after her mother. As the book opens, she's a 3rd grade teacher. I began listening to the book Wind Calls the Heart by Jeanette Oak and narrated by Nancy Peterson. I began listening to the book on Audible. I saw the TV show first, and I checked out to see if there was a book. No, I heard there was a book. So I looked it up, and I was interested in, hearing what the book had to say before I got into the TV show. I listened to books 1 through 4. Book 5 was about other people, not Elizabeth and her husband. Elizabeth and her family received a letter from her oldest brother, Jonathan. Her mother read the letter. In the letter, her older brother said that there was endless opportunities in the West. He thought Elizabeth should come to the West and find a husband. She was upset and she said to herself, never. He went on to say the teachers were much needed there. He talked to the superintendent, Mr. Higgins, and he said that if Elizabeth came, he would give her a position. To Elizabeth's surprise, her mother was agreeing with Jonathan. She felt that Elizabeth should go west. Her father, who she called Papa, came to talk to her later, to let her know whatever she decided would be fine with him. After much thought, she decided to go. After being there for a week or so, Elizabeth met Mr. Higgins, the superintendent. He came to Jonathan and his family's house for dinner. Elizabeth wanted to talk about the teaching job, but Mr. Higgins didn't want to talk about it because he didn't like talking about business with dinner. He wanted to talk about showing her around and constantly staring at her. Mr. Higgins finally got up to go. As he was leaving, he asked Elizabeth if he could call on her again. Elizabeth said in a business voice, well, we do need to talk about the position and what school I will teach in. We haven't found time for that yet. He squeezed her hand as he shook it. He said, I will see you Wednesday, and he winked at her. Elizabeth was shocked. When Wednesday came, Mr. Higgins took Elizabeth for a drive. She made sure to tell him that she had dinner planned so he could get her home on time. By the time he dropped her off, they still hadn't talked about the teaching position. He asked if he could call on her on Friday. She said, we have yet to talk about the teaching positions, so yes. When he picked her up on Friday, he had a picnic basket. He showed her land and said, we'll build a house here. Elizabeth said, Mr. Higgins, I don't understand. We came here to talk about my school. Instead, Mr. Higgins interrupted her. He said, I see I haven't made myself clear. You don't need to take a teaching position. We could get married soon. Elizabeth screeched, married? I came north to teach. I have no intentions of marrying you. He hastily walked away. They drove back to Jonathan's house in awkward silence. Once they got close to Jonathan's house, he said, you know I am superintendent. I hire and fire. Elizabeth said, well, maybe you would rather I return to the East. I would just tell Jonathan. He interrupted her and said, that's absurd. We have plenty of schools where teachers are needed. I'm sure I'll be able to find you a spot. Elizabeth said, thank you. That is why I came. Mr. Higgins sent her teaching appointment by letter. Jonathan told Elizabeth the assignment was 100 miles away, in the country, backwoods, barely opened up to civilization. I'll talk to Thomas. Elizabeth said, no, I want to take it. I'll miss you marrying the kids, but I have to go. Elizabeth knew this assignment was revenge for her not agreeing to marry Mr. Higgins. He probably assumed she would turn the job down and go home. So in actuality, Elizabeth teaching in Hope Springs is a punishment. Comparing the TV show to the books, Elizabeth had a very hard time in the books. Her life on TV is a cakewalk compared to the books. The first book is called When Calls the Heart, Canadian West, Book 1. The second book is When Comes the Spring, Canadian West, Book 2. The third book, When Breaks the Dawn, Canadian West, Book 3. Number 4, When Hope Springs New, Canadian West, Book 4. I didn't listen to books 5 and 6 because they weren't really about Elizabeth. This video is about Elizabeth's time before she got to Hope Valley. The experiences she had in the book and the television show are very different. Even her husband's name is different. That's why I just focused really on Elizabeth. Thanks for listening.